Good day, everyone. Today, we will discuss to you about Marxism and hegemony. In today's discussion, we are hoping that in the end of our report, we will recognize the ideology of Marxism and hegemony. We will realize the impact of Marxism and hegemony to our popular culture. So, sit back and relax and let us learn together the essence of Marxism and hegemony. Hence, this is an ideas of some philosophers and proponents. We cannot argue their ideas because that's their own ideas basically, but we can learn something from them. Dominant ideology and the media. An ideology is a belief system that is constructed and then embedded in the public consciousness by the media. Media texts represent the world usually in order to support a dominant ideology. For example, newspapers often promote the dominant ideology of patriotism through the representation of race and nationality. As a springboard of our report, it is clearly said that ideology and the media are related. Thus, ideologies give impact to our human consciousness. Yet, through media, ideologies has been supported and present to the public. For example, newspapers. A long time ago, people realized the information through newspapers, especially in promoting the sense of being patriot. Let us always remember that ideologies are based on the existing situation within and outside the countries. Here are some examples of dominant ideologies: capitalism, patriotism, marriage and family, and male superiority. Capitalism, the production of capital and consumption of surplus value as a life goal. As far as we know, capitalism is an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by state. So, kung ato yung tan-awon, sa capitalism, ang kasagara na himong kwartahan ang mga private investors and businesses. So, ginaingon pa nga, ang dato, musamot og kadato, while ang pobre, musamot og kapobre. Therefore, through capitalism, ang ubang tawo gamiton aron sila makwartahan. For example, unfair labor practices. Naiguban nga, grabe mo trabaho, hardworking kaayo, but dili compensate ang ilang salary sa ilahang trabaho. Gani, sa atong panahon karon, kung kinsa tong bugat ang trabaho, gamay og sweldo. But katong nasa hayahay, mo'y dagko og mga salary. Patriotism, to love, support, and protect one's country and its people. Now, being patriot is called being a citizen. To love and to die our country are heroic act. So, sa panahon karon, dili naman kinahanglan nga magpakamatay ta alang sa atong nasod, but through a simple act in showing our great love to our country really matters. Pinaka-basic ani mao ang pagtahod sa atong nasudnong awit ug pagtuman sa mga balaod nga maoy makahatag og kaayuhan sa atong tanan. Marriage and family. The right way to live is to marry an opposite-sex partner and have children. Basically, marriage is the sacred union between husband and wife. They are united to form a basic unit of society that is what we call family. Ideally, ang kaminyoon mauman ang seedbed of vocation kay mauman ni ang fundamental institution for our children. Male superiority. Men are more suited to positions of power and more suited to decision-making at work and at home. Ideally, long time ago, men are superior than women. If we look into the existing of philosophers, most of them are men and they are called wise men. Even our history, men are very superior than women. But now equal na ang tanan. Na ay mga butang nga mabuhat sa lalaki na dili mabuhat sa mga babae o na ay mga butang nga magbuhat sa mga babae nga dili mabuhat sa mga lalaki. Karon ang babae o lalaki pwede na tamang trabaho.
Marxism. Marxism is an economic and socio-political worldview that contains within it a political ideology for how to change and improve society by implementing socialism. It was originally developed in the early to mid-19th century by two German immigrants living in Britain, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Marxism is based upon materialist interpretation of history. Social groups are driven by creating and maintaining wealth. So Marxism state here that is a kind of political ideology that gives solution or way on how we improve society by implementing socialism. So therefore, it is an opposite of ideas of capitalism. So Marxism is an ideas coming from Karl Marx and Engels that signifies on maintaining wealth for the improvement of the society, not for private individuals. While class struggle, Marx and Engels believe that social change occur because of the struggle between different classes within a society who are constantly competing to improve their condition. The Marxist analysis leads to the conclusion that capitalism, the currently dominant form of economic management, leads to the oppression of the proletariat, who not only make up the majority of the world's populace but who also spend their lives working for the benefit of the bourgeoisie, the wealthy ruling class in the society. So, both authors that believe na ang kabaguhan for our society exists because of the struggle of all people. The sense of competition exists no matter what. So basically, mao ni ang situation has been occurred during their time. Nga first class of the society maura ang naay tingog in our society while the marginalized serves as the servant of the ruling class. So the analysis on it, we can say that nga ginagamit sa mga popular ang mga kwartahan ang mga marginalized para mosamot sila og kadato. So however, the marginalized also realize their well-being to the popular and wealthy ruling class because they become nothing without them.
To correct this inequality between the bourgeoisie, who are the wealthy minority, and the proletariat, who are the poorer majority, Marxism advocates and believes in the historical inevitability of proletarian revolution when the proletariat take control of government, and then implement reforms to benefit the class, namely the confiscation of private property, which is then taken under the control and run for the benefit of the people rather than to for the interest of private profit. Such a system of socialism, although Marxists believe that eventually a socialist society would develop into an entirely classist system, which is known as communism in Marxist terminology. During the time Karl Marx and Engels, there is a great struggle in equality. That is why they have a revolutionary act, what we call Marxism. Socialism to counteract the real situation for them, dapat magbuhat og programa ang gobyerno para sa kayuhan sa tanan. Dili kay magbuhat og programa para lang sa pipila or the noble class of the society. To relate this to our real situations, ang programa sa gobyerno intended for the common good. Nga unta, ang kwarta sa gobyerno gamiton para sa pampublikong kaayuhan. Example ani, mao kining dalan nato, paspas kayo ang pagbuhat sa mga dalan karon panahon na basically dili raman ang pipila ang makabenepisyo nini pat kitang tanan.
Marxism. Marx died in 1883, but his ideas still have a resonance today. Marx was an economist and philosopher and wrote his Communist Manifesto in 1848. In it, he advocated workers across the world should unite against their oppressors, the ruling classes, also their employers. He wrote, "Workers of all lands unite, you have nothing to lose but your change." His ideas led to the development of communist political systems around the world and Eastern Europe. This lasted until 1989, and this year the Berlin Wall was fall down and communism here was abandoned as the dominant political philosophy, although it still exists on countries such as China, North Korea, and Cuba. Even Karl Marx died, but still his ideologies still prevalent on these current situations, but his idea is an attack among the communist government. But for us, makaingon ta nga all forms of government ideally is good, but to implement on its essence really matters, especially if the one who lives on it and at home only for their own good, not for the common good. For example, gobat sa Russia o Ukraine, based on the news, makita nato nga different countries wala nagkasinabot sa ilang mga ideology and how to run their own government. So dili sila magkasinabot, and based on their history, and Ukraine is under of Russia. Then karon gusto sa Russia nga dili mo apel ang Ukraine to the alliance of NATO. To apply the idea of Marxism, it means it a lot. It presupposed that sometimes ang publiko ang luoy if and only if the economy will lose.
Marx and capitalism. Although Marx was alive long before the mass media we know, his ideas help us to understand media theory. In Marx's view, all social and cultural institutions, such as the family, the education system, and the legal system, as well as the mass media, which in his day would have been primarily the newspapers, are shaped by the economic basis of society. Therefore, an understanding of the economic sphere is essential to any understanding of the role played by the mass media in society. This means we need to know something about capitalism. This slide implies that we should learn something about history. One of the best ways to learn on it is through social media. Marx believed that social media will shape our cultures and beliefs and even our ideologies. Thus, he concluded that we should learn about capitalism because he believed that there is a great struggle economically on the existing of capitalism. So media have a vital role for the people in order for them be enlightened for the real existing situation. The two social classes in a capitalist society. In capitalist economies, one group of people, the ruling class or the bourgeoisie, own the capital to invest in factories, offices, machinery, new technology, and land. In other words, in almost all those things necessary to produce wealth. The one thing this group does not own is sufficient labor to create profitable products and services. Labor is owned by the second and much larger group in society, the working classes, who sell this labor in order to survive. This labor may be the manual or intellectual. However, much or little workers are paid for their labor. There must always be a profit margin so that the true value of the workers' labor is not returned to them. This is why Marxists see a conflict in the material interests of the two classes. The capitalist class wants to pay a little as possible for labor, while it is in the interest of the working class to have full value for their labor. This slide it emphasized that and capitalist gamito nila ang tao aron mas modako ilang production ug income. However, gamay ra ang sweldo nga ilang ihatag, mao ang gihatag, mao ning gitawag ni Karl Marx nga profit margin. Dili hiya ang sweldo nga gihatag sa kabug-aton sa trabaho. Analogically, katong manapasay og tubo, manggunahay, harvester, mas gamay og sweldo. Then, no choice sila kay kung dili pud sila mo trabaho, wala po sila ipakaon sa ilang pamilya.
False consciousness. Social institutions like the mass media play a key role in ensuring that working class remain happy with their situation despite the inherent unfairness of the system. Marx described the situation in which members of the subordinate classes cannot see that they are being dubbed as false consciousness. In Marxist terms, ideology can ultimately be identified as the lies, deceptions, and misinformation given to the working classes in order to maintain the state of false consciousness. Basically, it is the function of the media to help the marginalized and the outcast. However, there were times they give false consciousness because they hide the real situation of the history. Yet, media also has been held by the noble class and they make any propaganda in favor only to the noble class. So Karl Marx reminded us that we should be vigilant on what happenings to our situations because sometimes they corrupt the mind of everybody.
Applying Marx to the mass media today. When Marxists applied this ideology to the mass media, they will argue the institution of the mass media are owned by the ruling classes, e.g. Rupert Murdoch and Richard Branson. These institutions are used to indoctrinate the masses into believing capitalism is good for all. Media industry workers are exploited just as other workers. Therefore, the mass media exists to serve the ideological interests of the ruling class. So mao ni ang ginaingon nga on the previous slide, Marx attacked that being owned by the ruling classes, and they give only false information that leads to false consciousness of the mind.
Applying Marx to the mass media today, Marx argued that as an outcome of capitalist ideology was the alienation of the workers from the means of production, a disconnection between the maker and what is made. This is certainly true of the media, where the focus is on writers, directors, and actors, or even presenters. Individualism and hierarchy are emphasized over collectivism. The wider production team almost never receiving star billing. So it means that Mark argued that the media has been used by the ruling class to flourish their own ideologies. So without knowing that they deprive the life of somebody, um, thus they look on only for their own benefits, not for the benefits of everybody.
Marxism beyond Marx. Marx then regarded capitalism as fundamentally unfair and a corrupt way to organize society. He also abhorred nationalism and religious fundamentalism. Marxism does not just refer, however, to the ideas generated by Marx himself, but to a huge body of a work created by numerous academics, scholars, and revolutionaries who have adopted Marx's idea. Marx have so much hatred to the ruling class, to the capitalists, and even to the religious leaders. Kay kini man ang hinungdan why people struggle economically, socially, and so on. For example, sa religious aspect, as far as we know, kung ikaw ang pari sa unang panahon, ikaw sab ang ruler sa isa ka government. Sometimes, the church collect indulgences to the faithful para sa simbahan by giving this statement, bulahan katong mag-donate sa simbahan kay nalipay ang Ginoo, og nalipay ang simbahan. So, ang mga tao, muhatag pud sila og gamay ra ang ilang income. So, nisamot sila ka krisis kay instead ang income para sa ilang pamilya, ila pagyod gihatag sa simbahan. Then, in the end, ang church leaders ra ang mabulahan kay sila man ang mogamit sa mga donations. That is why there are a lot of philosophers support the idea of Karl Marx. Example ni ini is si Antonio Gramsci, Italian philosopher.
Antonio Gramsci. One example of this is Antonio Gramsci, 1891 to 1937. He was an Italian political theorist, a founding member and one-time leader of the Communist Party of Italy. He was imprisoned by Mussolini's fascist regime. He is renowned for his concept of cultural hegemony as a means of maintaining the state in the capitalist society. On this slide, Antonio Gramsci was the proponent about the ideas of cultural hegemony to support the ideas of Karl Marx. Hegemony. Hegemony is the way in which those in power maintain their control. Dominant ideologies are considered hegemonic. Power in society is maintained by constructing ideologies which are usually promoted by the mass media. Hegemonic ideas emphasizes that power in society is maintained by constructing ideologies which are promoted by the mass media. So Gramsci emphasized that mass media was being controlled by some ideologies that bear false consciousness to the public.
Gramsci and hegemony. In advanced industrial societies, hegemonic cultural innovation, such as compulsory schooling, the mass media, and popular culture, have indoctrinated workers to a false consciousness. As for Gramsci, kinahanglan i-reform ang mass media nga dili magpagamit sa mga ideologies, kun dili kinahanglan mag-promote kini og cultural innovations nga dili magsalig kanunay sa unsa ihatag sa mga noble class, then okay na dayon. Kinahanglan nga mag-eskwela ang tao in order to know the truth and to learn something. Sa ato pa, Gramsci ideas were really useful until now sa nga magtuon og pag-eskwela ang kinahanglan gyud aron dili ta mahimong slave sa atong kaugalingong nasod. Through education, we broaden our horizon and we learn to do more with extraordinary well that will give us good and decent life. Cultural hegemony. Cultural hegemony is the philosophic and sociological that a culturally diverse society can be ruled or dominated by one of its social classes. It is the dominance of one social group over another. Example, the ruling class over all the other classes. The theory claims that the ideas of the ruling class come to be seen as the norm. They are seen as universal ideologies, perceived benefits everyone whilst only really benefiting the ruling class. And cultural hegemony implies the rules and regulation or norms come from the ruling class, yet they make their norms and favor to them, not for everyone. Ang ruling class gabuhat og balaod nga abi nimo og kaayuhan para sa tanan ng aim. But ang tumong diay is to protect their own business and intentions. So culturally, the lower class in the society were being used by the noble class. They become servant to them.
Hegemony in more detail. Hegemony dates to the Greek verb hegestai, which translates to lead. Early leaders who were able to exert a great deal of control and influence over a group of people might be referred to as hegemons. A hegemon had to have a great deal of support from at least one dominating class in order to keep the people of the state from rebelling against the leadership. Not only money, but also other forms of dominance can influence the hegemony of the group. For example, control of the media, up until recently, has influenced things like what shows get aired, what shows get cancelled, and the degree to which television station must censor news or television shows. On this side, it is clearly said that hegemony keep the people of the state from rebelling against the leadership. So, hinay-hinay gipakita dire through social media, gina-prevail and tinuod nga pagdumala sa usa ka panggobyerno sa gikaingon while ago that social media sometimes or always being controlled by nobbies or ruling class to protect their own intentions, either it is good or not.
Hegemony in more details. However, hegemony of the publishing industry is in considerable flux given the many independent websites like YouTube. Many musicians and actors are avoiding the media by self-publishing their music and videos on sites accessible to all. As the public decides to self-publish artistic works or blogs, and hegemony begins to shift to the people. The people now, agreeable, hold hegemony instead of the broadcasting companies. However, traditional broadcasting companies are attempting to regain hegemony by using these new technologies. So, mauna man ni karon ang also. So, there is a great shift in our popular culture. So, and we can access any website we want to be. We can download and upload some information from different websites. Also nakaayon ni karon sa atua. Easy to know what the happening around the world and easy to access information that we want to be. Gani, this is the source of income from everybody. Example, vlogging mo naman ay sikat karon. Diba sa sige na to og subscribe sa ilang video, the more sila maka-income. Kay kung daghan sila subscriber, so daghan mo tanaw silang video, so daghan dako pud ilang income. Ginahan pud ta mo tan-aw kay malingaw ta sa ilang mga videos, so magpaload ta para maka-access ta sa ilang video, and to analyze well we pay for them kay di man ta maka-access kung di ta magpaload.
Hegemony in more detail. Hegemony tends to more often refer to the power of a single group in a society to essentially lead and dictate the other groups of the society. This may be done through communications, through influence of voters or government leaders. A single country may also be considered a hegemony if it has enough power to influence the way other countries behave. States that are hegemonies, like the British Empire in the mid-19th century, had extraordinary influence on many other countries. Their partial or total control of other countries was either obtained through a show of military force and through control of trade industries. Hegemony that exists in a single country means the dominant and most influential group often influences policy so that the greatest advantage accrues to the dominant group. For example, some consider the wealthy have hegemony in US when it comes to tax laws. Best example is during this election campaign when use media to show their platforms and intentions why they want to be elected. So daghan kaayo na karong panahon, especially in Facebook or even YouTube. Many bloggers did a lot to make videos for the public. However, sometimes information have been dictated by the single group. Ipashow nila ang usa ka utang for them to be appreciated by the public. Ang importante nga dili ta magpailad sa media. Kinahanglan nga magtuon ta in order for us to learn and discover the essence of truthfulness, para dili ta makagain of false consciousness.
Lastly, before we will end our report today, we will leave this to you, the very known sayings of Karl Marx, that capitalism teach a man to fish, but the fish he catches aren't his. They will belong to the person paying him to fish, and if lucky, he might get paid enough to buy a new fish for himself. So, it is a challenge to all of us. Kinahanglan, dili kita magpagamit sa uban aron sila mahimong kinidla nga or well-known nga mga adunahan, ug dili kita magsalig pag-ayo. Kundili, let us educate ourselves and live our life to the fullest by upholding the essence of common good. This is our references for our reports today. And thank you, and may God bless us all.